Today's modern world allows us abundant comforts, but the human spirit doesn't thrive on being overly comfortable. In fact, it withers. Having it too easy leads to, at best, feeling unfulfilled, feeling adrift. Worse, we see depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and other thrill-seeking addictions. Training to do hard things not only prepares us for the challenges life will always throw at us, it provides ways to grow. Hey guys, what's going on? I'm Michael Bullock, and I'm the host and founder of the Man of Mastery podcast. Now, whether you're joining us for the first time or you've been here for a little while, I want to welcome you, and I want to thank you for being here. It truly means a ton to me. I know your time is valuable. I really appreciate it, and I do appreciate you. This is the show where we're putting together purpose and passion in action, where we embrace getting out of our comfort zones to grow, standing ready to learn, and ready to lead. This is your resource to discover and learn from others, their mastery journey, and apply it in yours. We're here to align happiness, fulfillment, health, wellness, productivity, and peace. I often like to comment on why this show is called Man of Mastery. It's about self-mastery in service to others. Today I have the honor of sharing an interview I did on Josh Guerrero's All Around Adventure podcast. You probably remember him from about a month ago here on episode 40, the guy I called the real-life Indiana Jones. Josh is a great interview host, and he ran a fun episode where he allowed me to talk about some of my favorite formative travel adventures, some of the challenges life threw at me a while back, and then we also talk about traveling to seek out crucible events to get outside of our comfort zones and grow. I had a great time chatting with Josh, and I'm really excited to share this one with you. Stay tuned at the end for a reminder about Josh's dual trek effort. It's Operation Dual Trek, and he's doing that to benefit veterans. You can find out at the end of this episode where to support that cause, how to tune into Josh, and how to learn more about the All Around Adventure podcast.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name is Josh Guerrero, and I'm the host and founder of this podcast, which is simply titled the All Around Adventure Podcast. This is the show where you hear amazing tales from afar and get the all-important life lessons that go along with them. And I am talking with travelers of all kinds on this podcast. I am talking with elite warriors, digital nomads, best-selling authors, bloggers, adventurers, philanthropists, you name it. If they have a fantastic travel story to tell with some great life lessons to share, it's my job to seek them out and bring them on this podcast and extract their stories and life lessons through powerful conversations to help you level up in your life. And I have a fantastic guest joining me today. For today, I'll be talking with Michael Bullock. Michael is the host and founder of the Man of Mastery podcast, a show through which he tries to help his audience achieve elite life performance. And he does this by talking with a wide array of guests. And not too long ago, I was actually a guest on his show. I joined him for episode 40 to talk about my time as a Peace Corps volunteer and my time in England as a grad student. I also got to talk a little bit about Operation Dual Trek, but he hosts a fantastic show. I definitely encourage you all to go check that out once you're done listening to this episode. But of course, his story goes much deeper than that. Back around his 30th birthday, he set off into the world and he spent 7 months trekking around the world on a long extended backpacking trip covering multiple countries across 6 continents. And then since then, he's gone on to do other amazing things. And one of them includes traveling around doing obstacle course racing and seeking out other endurance events. And I found this particularly fascinating because I often wondered, why would someone deliberately go travel somewhere just to seek out suffering? But as we get into this conversation and that you'll hear, you'll find that there is good reason behind as to why Michael does it and why so many other people choose to go to events like Spartan races and Tough Mudders and SEAL Fit events just to, like I said, seek out suffering. So very interesting conversation, but there's a lot of value that comes when we do get out of our comfort zone and seek out suffering. And you'll certainly hear about that once we get into my discussion with Michael today. And that's really all I have to say on that. Let's just go ahead and get right into this. I really think you all are going to enjoy this episode. I definitely had a great time chatting with Michael about this topic. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get right into this. And this is my conversation with Michael Bullock. All right, here we go, everyone. Another awesome episode of the All Around Adventure podcast. And today I'm joined by Michael Bullock, who is the creator of Man of Mastery. Michael, what's going on, man? Thanks so much for taking time for joining me today, and welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up, Josh? Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Looking forward to being on.
Yeah, likewise. You know, you and I were actually on the ground in Lake Tahoe a couple months back, but unfortunately I missed you there, and I'm just kind of sort of catching up with you after the fact. But I don't know about you, but I had a great time there. What about you? What was it like running in the race there?
Yeah, amazing venue, amazing event. I ran one that took all of Saturday for me, and really Friday prep and Sunday recovery, and watching my son's race on Sunday. So sorry to have missed you. That took up kind of my whole focus for the weekend. Didn't get a whole lot of on-site podcasting done with the Spartan Up Podcast Festival, but some incredible people there at the race, at the festival, and maybe we'll hook up there this year.
Yeah, I think so. Well, and we're certainly going to be diving into the topic of obstacle course racing as we get further on to this episode. But as you and I were connecting, you also kind of cued me in on another amazing experience that you had. And shortly before your 30th birthday, you set off to go backpacking around the world. So I kind of want to hear a little bit about that experience. Can you tell us, what kind of inspired you to take a trip like that, and where did you set off to?
Yeah, sure. No, I give all the credit for that really in inspiration to a guy I met through work who became a very, very good friend. In fact, was best man at my wedding ultimately. And he's from New Zealand. So what he told me, he had these photo books laying around back in the days of hard copy photos.
Right.
And just had these amazing pictures of like Mount Everest and all these places he had been. And he was telling me, he goes, look, at that time, he goes, like, we're a nation of maybe 4 million people, and we're sort of in the middle of nowhere. It looks like we're close to Australia, but even then we're hours away by flight. And of the 4 million people, Kiwis in the world, maybe 1 million live abroad. So we have this strong sense of isolation and the danger in that. And so he said, our view is that you have your formal education through school, but then we also have a form of education that we call overseas expedition. And we really encourage our kids to go, even if it's, a month or 2 weeks or 3 months, get out and see the world, see different cultures and learn about themselves and learn different things. So America is so big. And then by extension in North America here with Canada and Mexico, there's so much richness to see that it's easy to get stuck kind of at home. And that just really, kicked me in the tail to get out there and want to do something. So I put together, it took me a while, but I put together a fairly epic trip. I spent about 7 months. I planned it out, but then I grabbed a backpack and literally sort of went around the world.
All right, that's pretty cool. It's interesting how you describe New Zealanders, or what do they call themselves? Kiwis?
Kiwis,
yeah. It's just like how they practice that worldly travel expedition. I just remember with myself growing up, maybe I'm from Michigan originally, and just taking a trip to one of the Great Lakes, that was like an epic adventure for me in and of itself, even though I literally just took a car like for like an hour down the road. But then for them to say, yeah, you need to get a plane, you need to go here, you need to go to this country, you need to get out of your own country, that's pretty unique there, I'd say.
Yeah, it's an incredible sort of view, and it took me to my mid-20s to get anywhere international, and then as you said, sort of late in my 20s to do this big one. But then you do it, and I think we'll talk about this. There's just there's just so much you learn from it. It's much more than just the incredible experience of the places you go and the things you see. There's just a whole richness of learning about yourself and developing a worldview.
Yeah, definitely. So you got this inspiration to go out and start doing this trip. Now, how did you actually go about preparing for it? Let's say as far as setting up like the finances and the logistics, because I'd say that these are two of kind of like the biggest things that would ultimately, keep someone from taking a trip like this. The word like, hey, can I afford it? Or can I put my life on hold to go out and do this? So I'm kind of curious to ask you just how did you go about getting all that stuff ready to go be out in the world for 7 months?
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe 2 or 3 things of note around that. I would say you're never ready. There's never an easy time. It's probably like having a kid or something. You're never ready, and you just gotta, like a lot of these things, like podcasting, whatever it might be, you just gotta lean into it. And in fact, I put it off several times. Again, this is my late 20s, so I was already into a working career. I went from a large corporation where I met that buddy, the Kiwi buddy, and then to a startup. And I tried to do it in between, thinking between jobs would be the perfect time. And the startup goes, hey, we're in startup mode. We need you now. And so in the heat of that battle, it was put off a few times. And then finally it was like, I can't put off life anymore. There's a balance to this. So I'd say one is, obviously you got to kind of work it out. And I was fortunate to negotiate the ability to do that as a leave of absence and come back. But there's never a perfect time is one, I would say. 2, financially, I don't know that I had a good sense of what it was going to cost, but, we're talking, dollars almost 20 years ago, but I saved up $10,000. And I can tell you that I came back with money in the bank.
Wow.
The US dollar has been so strong against so many currencies overseas that, it was, and again, I was young, I was doing hostels. The cheapest place I stayed, I remember I paid the equivalent of 25 cents one night for a room and a bed.
Wow.
In like a backpacker's hut in Nepal. So you can go incredibly cheap. And then the third thing, and this was definitely fortunate and maybe a little bit unique, is I was traveling for work at that time in my life and was saving up frequent flyer miles. And I don't know what it costs these days, but most of the airlines have what they call an around the world ticket. And you can pick a direction around the globe and you get a certain number of stops as long as you keep going either east or west. And I was actually able to pick that up with the miles I had saved up. So I spent 140,000 Delta miles, got business class, and figured out a trip west around the world.
All right, rolling in style then. I like it. So
yeah, I grew out just quick note on that. In my travels, I grew out a gnarly, ugly goatee along the way. And I can remember boarding a couple flights, get on all unshaven with a backpack on and like an Australian style hat. And the flight attendant's going like, hey, turn right. And I'm going like, no, I'm turning left. I'm in seat like 1A.
Oh, I would have loved to see the look on their faces. All right. Well, you actually just made me think of something. You brought up that point about how, you're never entirely sure if you're ready for it or not, or if it's the right time. But, I couldn't agree with you more that, the stars are never going to align perfectly for us to start something. And, it's also kind of funny how you mentioned this. I'm part of a podcaster support group on Facebook, and someone posted it in there earlier this morning asking, okay, I want to get started. So how do I get started? And I just commented saying, just get started now, figure stuff out as you go, because that's ultimately just what you have to do, right? Because the longer you wait, the more you're going to try to rationalize not doing it at all. And once those creep in, then you're just going to wonder, where did all that time go? And your competitors, if you have any, in whatever you're doing, they're already way ahead of you because they already started themselves. So.
Yeah, right. Whether it's business, whether it's a new venture, whether it's, family, whether it's travel, you're probably just going to get out there and do it. Nothing's perfect. You're going to make mistakes. That's part of the fun. And, the sooner you get after it, the sooner you're going to realize the joy of whatever it is you're embarking on, and probably wish you'd done it sooner.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit more about this trip. Let's get into some of the details. So was New Zealand the first place that you had went to? You mentioned Nepal in there. So kind of just take us to like the first place that you set foot in. Yeah,
let me see if I can do the rundown real quick. I So I needed to start, I was going west.
Mm-hmm.
And I was living in Atlanta at the time. And I wanted to go to South America. I wanted to go to Mexico and South America in this journey, including Chile. I guess the stereotype is Americans have a bad sense of international geography. And I didn't realize that most of South America is east of most of North America.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, wait a minute, I want to go west. I want to go to South America. So I think I officially started my trip in Santiago, Chile, which means I was supposed to end my trip there, which that's kind of an interesting story when we get to the end of this thing, because I jumped off my round the world ticket early, and that did not go over well with some people in the airlines and customs and immigration. So yeah, officially I started in Chile and then Mexico, and then went from there to Asia.
Gotcha. So what were some of the key highlights? I mean, because we're talking 7 months that you're out there just getting on planes, hopping all these different spots on the world. So, of course, we're not going to be able to get everything in this call, but just what were some of like the key highlights that you remember from this experience?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you walk away with so much. So see if I can do the quick rundown of stops or countries. So Chile, Mexico for a buddy's wedding. Then
Good
I was
place
on
for
my
a
way.
wedding.
Yeah. Destination wedding. And then I was on my way to either Australia or New Zealand. I forget which order I did them in. And that was a Delta partner flight on Korean Air. So I went through Seoul, and it was just supposed to be a daytime layover. And it turned out to be in the middle of a snowstorm. So, nothing goes right no matter how well you plan it. So
Right.
I actually ended up stuck in Korea for a day. And actually got to unexpectedly spend the night in Korea, went out to dinner in Seoul. So, right away, kind of a highlight of an unexpected stopover. The airlines treated us to a dinner in Seoul. It was amazing, right? So just stuff like that happens. Over there in Asia Oceania did Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Vietnam, Nepal was quite a big stop for 5 weeks. I think the longest series of flights I did had to backtrack from there because these were all, airline miles.
Right.
From Kathmandu, I think back to Singapore, back to Vietnam, and then maybe through Korea over to transfer through Paris to get to South Africa through Johannesburg to Cape Town. And then ultimately, 7 months goes pretty fast, unbelievably.
Yeah,
After South Africa, I think that's when I found my way back up to Greece, spent some time in Greece, and then ended up in England before coming home.
So you literally hit all 6 continents in one fell swoop, basically here.
Yeah, just missed one. But, in terms of other highlights, I think, we can always pick some out, and happy to go through some of those places if you're interested in any of those. But
sure, yeah.
To me, like one of the biggest things is the people you meet along the way. They kind of make the experience, and you make friends, or you walk away with these stories of the personalities that you meet while traveling.
Yeah, I can agree with you there. And that was a tricky thing for me at first when I kind of started, bumping out to the world, because I'm introverted by nature, and especially in some of the places I've lived, I lived in a rural village in West Africa for 2 years, and that was quite the adjustment. But I think a lot of it is also just having an open mind too, doesn't it? Because obviously a lot of cultures that you're going to come across, there's going to be a lot of differences that you're going to observe, and some of them may seem strange and unusual as well. But I think once you have an open mind and just have that curiosity and just what you pick up and what you take from that, and especially when you interact with the locals too, that definitely makes for a very good memorable experience. I can agree with you there.
Yeah, it sure does. Curious is just a great word for it. I know we'll talk a little bit about the Man of Mastery adventure that I'm on now, but if I think about it in hindsight, really what I'm doing with that thing, it's all about curiosity and learning through experience, oftentimes through things that aren't so comfortable. And especially international travel, it kind of provides all that. You get a physical aspect of it, because probably almost without fail, you're going to walk more than you do here at home. We have a fairly car-based, auto-based, sedentary lifestyle. You're going to find yourself in very, very different cultures that may not value your freedom of expression or civil liberties as much as here. You're going to have different ways you deal with authorities and respect the fact that you don't live in that place. You're not a citizen of that place. Maybe different cultural practices, religions. You're going to be put in uncomfortable situations. Sometimes maybe things that you're afraid of, maybe things that are literally dangerous. So there's a level of awareness and intuition that you have to develop. Things are going to be frustrating. They're not going to go your way. So you're going to have to develop a level of emotional control and stoicism. So like all these things that I think are sort of interesting to read and talk about, man, they're all packaged right there if you go do some international travel.
Yeah, definitely. As you were talking about that, one of the policies I developed for myself was more or less just dive right in. Especially one of the things that was really unusual to me was some of the different food dishes that I came across around the world. When I was living in West Africa, I was a teacher trainer there for Peace Corps, and one of the students at the school in my village, he came up to me and one of the teachers. He had this big giant rat dangling by the tail that he literally, no joke, flushed out of its hole. He just put a pail of water into this hole in the ground and snatched this rat as it came up and killed it with his bare hands. And then I'm like, dude, don't bring that to me. Get rid of it. And he says, oh, no, we'll eat it. And I'm like, what? No, get rid of it. And then the teacher's like, oh no, these rats are edible here. They'll cook it up and we can all eat it. I'm like, oh, all right, well, just bring me a piece once it's ready then, please. And that was, just because obviously, of course, here in the States, most people wouldn't just, eat a rat that they just found out in the middle of the field somewhere. But here, that was the very normal thing. And so, and I was, happy to try it. It actually wasn't half bad, but, it just kind of just goes to show how you mentioned that getting out of your comfort zone and just realizing that a lot of the things that we may be afraid of or uncomfortable with really aren't that bad as we made them out to be, So it just really comes a matter of just diving in and just, really kind of just having that great experience that you could, remember for years on.
Absolutely. I don't think I have any culinary stories quite like that, but you're so right. It seems like all of our fears, and I think it's probably a biological survival mechanism from days past, is fears kept us alive. And they're still valuable. There's a great book, I think it's called The Gift of Fear, I read a long time ago on the recommendation of a friend, that is all about distinguishing valid fear from fears of things that really people or things that aren't meant to hurt us or not unlikely that are unlikely to hurt us. And our mind has a way of getting away from us and overblowing those fears until we actually try it. And hey, maybe that thing tasted like chicken. Maybe it was pretty good. But yeah, I love that philosophy of just getting out there and kind of saying yes and trying things.
Yeah, and then not to mention that I think I also fear regret a little bit more. When I was in Lake Tahoe, I sat down with Patrick Sweeney, who you've also had on your podcast too, and he was telling me the story of how he was fearing a lot of regret when he was in his hospital bed with leukemia and thinking that he was so afraid of flying and doing all this stuff up to this point, and he thought that he was going to move on into the next world without having done all these things, and that's what ultimately led him to do all this really cool shit. He's flying around in stunt planes now, even though he was afraid to fly for the first 35 years of his life. So I think the fear of regret, kind of sort of trumps a lot of those fears that we might have otherwise.
Yeah, that's a great way to flip it around. And, maybe kind of a mental exercise is to work up those emotions of, not what if I did this, what if I didn't do this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So kind of continuing on with sort of this topic of things being uncomfortable, getting out of our comfort zone. No doubt that you've probably had some challenges, some misadventures along the way too. Any of those kind of come to mind from the 7 months there? Because again, you were touching all of these different parts of the world, so I'm sure you must have had at least a couple.
Yeah, I'm sure there were a number. Oftentimes, language barriers just make things feel uncertain. If not present challenges. Everywhere I went, I tried to learn a little bit, even if it was learn how to count from 1 to 10, which,
if you sit there reciting the numbers 1 to 10 to somebody, it doesn't necessarily facilitate anything, but they'll think it's cute and, breaks the ice a little bit.
Right.
Or just, things like hello and goodbye and thank you, common courtesies. But I don't know, maybe a couple I could pick out from Nepal just because it's such an incredible place that I enjoyed so much. And maybe talk about like a couple different types of fear. So one is, if you travel around that country by bus, the roads are narrow, there are hairpin turns, these buses are massive, traffic's coming both directions. And you kind of go, well, like these guys have got it dialed in. They drive this route every day or whatever, right? They're professionals. But then you notice the driver has like a shrine on the dashboard of pictures of his family and his ancestors and religious icons. And you kind of go like, this guy seems like he's ready to go out at any moment.
He's already made his peace.
The side of a cliff. I'm not completely sure he's planning on coming home tonight, or that he feels certain that he's going to. So you kind of hit stuff like that makes you wonder. And then I had another experience there as well, which was probably related a little bit to a language barrier, where I think I was transferring between buses in some town, and it was unclear, or we weren't communicating effectively on how long we were going to wait, what was going on. Our understanding was that another bus was coming right along. It ended up being like a fairly long delay, and the group that were transferring buses, they kind of moved us into an internal courtyard of a building. And go back to sort of the trust your gut, trust your intuition kind of thing. That was probably, of anything I could think of, luckily ended up not to be any kind of physical danger, but that was the one place my radar went off that I can really think of, other than the normal pickpockets and things like that, of like, okay, this just doesn't sort of seem right. We've suddenly gotten physically isolated from the rest of our travel group. Nobody's given us a straight answer on when the bus is coming. And so in the end, I just kind of, got out of there as politely and as quickly as I could back to the street and back in view of public and things like that. So, those were a couple things where, maybe the fear of riding in a bus, no big deal. And in other cases, maybe trust the fear and kind of go with your gut.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And, for all we know, all of that probably might have been pretty benign. There probably was no real issue there. But I think, when it comes to just things like that, if your gut is telling you one thing, it's probably because it has your best interest at heart. So maybe, listen to it. I mean, I don't think it wants you to fail or get hurt or anything like that. So who knows, what came from that situation with everyone there. Hopefully they're all okay. I'm sure they are. But that's an interesting point. And that's actually a very interesting scenario to be in too. It's just, why would they just isolate everyone into this, place that's well away from the street? That's kind of interesting.
Yeah. And that's not to say like, hey, don't travel because there are dangers out there. I mean, and I'm probably a little over the top, when my son was an infant, and I kind of looked at it as like, look, I'm going to get out of here as politely and quickly as I can. But I'd rather be, kind of safe than sorry is the old saying.
Right.
And when I had an infant son, standing in line at the grocery or something, everybody wants to go like, hey, cute baby. I always sort of looked at it as, this is a stranger. I'm never going to see him again. And I'd rather you just not get close to my son. And I don't want my son, as he grew into a toddler, didn't want him to become accustomed to talking to strangers. And so, at the offense of probably, or at the risk of probably offending some people, just early on, I just started telling people, hey, sorry, he doesn't talk to strangers. And that was just another way of going like, well, maybe I'm a little over the top, but I'm just going to be safe.
Well, I think that strikes a good balance. Like some people would say that, oh, you're just being paranoid. Everyone's nice and, you can trust everyone. I'm like, well, you're not really being paranoid. You're just being prepared. You're just being ready. I mean, so, but it is one of those things that, just going back to simply like you said, just rather be safe than sorry, because, it's this, having a son is much different than you being isolated in this random courtyard out of a bus stop. There's a lot more at stake now here. So I think, having your guard up maybe just a little bit more this time around too, I'd say is pretty valid.
Yeah. And we're very, very fortunate that for the most part, life in America is safe. Life is generally valued more than it is in a lot of places in the world. And so I think that's just a sense that, as people start to travel abroad, you just have to develop more of that situational awareness, kind of more paying more attention to what's going on around you. My wife is very intuitive in those kind of ways. I think I became accustomed to growing up in our bubble here. And it's just something I've had to learn to practice. And again, the world's not out to get you, but it's always good to understand your surroundings and kind of what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. So, but that definitely sounds like a pretty amazing experience. But kind of shifting gears a little bit, following that experience, you kind of got hit with a pretty big setback. And around your 30th birthday, you suffered a pretty staggering back injury. So can you tell us a little bit about that and just kind of how you went from that point to recovery and things like that?
Yeah, sure. I'll blaze through some history there, and maybe I'll just refresh in my own memory. I'll work through some of the end of that trip, which and this kind of segues from remain flexible and remain aware, if you will. So even going back to Nepal, which was in this was April of 2001. I ended up leaving Nepal and just a very, very short time later. I mean, it might maybe a day later. I don't recall. There was a tragic murder, I guess is the only thing you can really call it. One of the royal Nepalese family, came into a dinner and murdered the king and a bunch of the family. Whoa. And so the whole country was on lockdown. So if I had still been there a day later or whatever it might have been, then all of a sudden you're in a situation where travel plans change very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But I was leaving, and one of the reasons I was leaving, and one of the reasons I kind of mentioned like staying flexible in life is 2001. Osama bin Laden's name started popping up all over the place, and so I just started becoming very in tune to the State Department warnings, and I would just kind of ebb and flow with some of my travel plans and destinations, and changed a few along the way. And then I ended up back in the States in August of 2001. So, very shortly before 9/11.
Wow.
So as you mentioned, I was 29 years old. I was turning 30 that fall, and in great health. I'd backpacked around the world, carrying a big pack up and down some big mountains and glaciers and incredible stuff like that. Sort of took a day for my 30th birthday and did a solo, 14 miles or so around the Appalachians on a fairly challenging trail. Like things were awesome, but at the same time, in hindsight, I never kind of took care of my back or took caution of my back. Your parents always say like bend at your knees, lift the right way, things like that.
Right.
Whether it's through sport or just everyday life or picking up that travel backpack or whatever. Eventually, I ended up just kind of blowing it out one day in like a weird accident, and it is absolutely crazy. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. It's a super debilitating, lower back pain, sciatic nerve, and it's the kind of thing that can just affects everything. So a lot of things we take for granted in our health, especially when we travel. I could barely sit in a chair for a few hours at work, or just sit down. Period. To the point where I think I write this on my website. I've told some people to get up in the morning and lean over the sink to shave was such an effort that then I would collapse again in like a cold sweat and have to recover before I could stand up to take a shower. So ultimately, I ended up having a repair surgery, which is. It's an incredible help, but it's certainly not a fix because nothing's the same, and we don't really know how to fix the back.
Right.
So you end up kind of having to figure it out all over again. It took a really long time to rehab it to a decent state, especially as active as I've always been, travel and sport and otherwise. And that can get really frustrating. You start to have a lot of doubts. You doubt what the quality of life is going to be. I mean, to put it in perspective, hey, in Nepal, I hiked up to almost 18,000 feet carrying a pack. The day I went into surgery for my back, I had to ask my mom to put my socks on for me.
Man.
So you really start to doubt what life's going to look like after that. Even would it affect my career? Could I still go to an office? Could I sit in a chair? Could I travel? Things like that. And so, I guess if you go with the theme of these challenges in life offer opportunities, depending on how you think about it, well, hey, there's a chance to really reflect on the things you do value in life and kind of check in on what's important. And ultimately, through a variety of things, I'd account for healthy lifestyle, doing a lot of research into dietary kind of things. I discovered chiropractic, some yoga routines that I found that really helped for me, and have worked my way back to a very active lifestyle now. And we're going to talk a little bit about obstacle course racing and Spartan brand sport, which has become a very big part of my life and with my family. And I feel very fortunate to have made largely a recovery and a lot of modifications, but I can go out and do the things I want to do with my son and have a great quality life.
All right. Outstanding, man. Yeah. Back injuries. Oh man, they are the worst. It was about a year and a half ago. I had suffered a mild herniated disc in my low back. And yeah, it's just kind of the way I was feeling. It wasn't quite to the extent how you just described, but I just remembered that like trying to roll out of bed first thing in the morning to get going with the day was an ordeal, because you're in yourself just in the right position in bed where it doesn't hurt. And then trying to move away from that, it was just awful. Fortunately, like I said, it was pretty mild. And so the doctor just basically says, yeah, just a little bit of time. Don't do anything too strenuous. And, start doing yoga, which is now a pretty big part of my practice even today. A lot of men especially will, run jokes on yoga, but my goodness, the benefits I've gotten from that. I do that every Sunday now. But so like, how long was it for you when you kind of felt comfortable enough to kind of start taking on these more audacious, physical endeavors, especially obstacle course racing? Like, can you kind of give us a little bit of a time window, when that all started going down?
Yeah. I mean, it was really, so you lose a lot of strength. I don't know if it's by way of so it was several months between the probably most acute injury and the surgery. And so I ruptured 2 lumbar discs and you impinge those nerves. I had, you get the sciatic nerve pain, but then you actually start to get numbness and then lose feeling. So you're literally killing the nerve. So not only is it a recovery of just flexibility and muscle strength, core strength, all those kind of things, then you're waiting for nerve regeneration, which can take years. I think they told me they give it about a year and a half, and that will be the maximum nerve regeneration that you get. In my case, at a year and a half, I still had numbness in my lower foot, small toe, things like that, and largely that's gone now. So I believe I was able to continue recovery, even nerve recovery beyond that period. So. I mean, literally years, but even then, there's a constant fear of like, am I gonna blow it out again? Like, right. I don't want to end up back there again. So for a long time, I kind of switched gears away from some of the things I really, really have enjoyed doing sport wise. I do like to cycle. And so I just, kind of started doing more of those kind of things, low impact, but probably backed off the intensity of some things I liked. And then, just, had some friends drag me out to start playing soccer again. And, so, I mean, at this point, we're probably talking like a decade later, where I was feeling flexible enough. And look, yoga, crack all the jokes you want, but the bottom line is most guys are not very flexible. Sitting in a chair like most of us do for work, it's bad for your back. It's bad for your health, bad for your posture. And flexibility is one thing that takes a hit in that. So there's nothing but good stuff that comes out of flexibility. And to say it more broadly, so there's when we start to talk about Spartan race, there's a Spartan race. I think he runs Elite or Pro here in San Diego. Kevin Gelati, who posted something on Instagram recently that I love. He said there is zero downside to physical fitness, zero, right? Because there's only good things. You can go out and do fun stuff. And I kind of look at flexibility that way too. There's only good stuff that comes out of it. So I was very probably tentative and doing modified stuff for really like, a decade or so, and then got back into soccer. And 5 years ago, 2015, had some buddies over for Labor Day weekend. I was playing soccer 4 days a week. And these guys are like, hey, we're going out in 2 weeks to run this thing in San Diego called Spartan Race. Obstacles, you run on a trail. It's a lot of fun. Come join us. You play soccer 4 days a week. Won't be any problem. And that's how I got into this thing. And so that's like 15 years after my injury. Back feels good at this point. Had no idea what a Spartan race would be like. Mm-hmm. And not in terms of back injury, but just in terms of fitness and a very functional and different type of what I had been doing exercise-wise. It absolutely crushed me. It crushed me. And, again, you go back to the hurdles or the obstacles in life, literally. You can look at that two ways. You could say, well, that's not for me. That was too hard. But I looked at it as like, man, this thing's kind of interesting. It really kicked my butt. I got to try another one of these. So, that's what set me down this path.
Yeah, I really like that quote that you just said about that there's no downsides to being physically fit. I think I'm paraphrasing that, it's interesting how you mentioned that, because that's one of the points that I include in almost at least in a fair amount of my solo podcast episodes where I talk about self-development. And I basically say that when it comes to self-development, the first thing I'd say anyone should prioritize is their physical health, because I always say that your body is the vessel with which you do all things. If you don't have it running optimally, that's going to trickle into just every other area of your life, whether that's your relationships, your career, your business, your role as a parent, whatever facet you're expected to show up in. How you show up in those areas is, affected entirely on just how physically fit you are. So, and of course, we're not saying that everyone has to be like a ripped, jacked, cut, shredded bodybuilder. I mean, they could if they want to, but I just say any avenue in fitness is valid. I mean, you're an obstacle course racer. There's CrossFitters out there. There's triathletes. There's just maybe some people who like to go to Zumba or Pilates. It's all valid. It's like just get yourself moving and reap the benefits.
Yeah, 100%. And I would agree with that, and I'll give you a parallel back to some of the yoga stuff I do. So I've rarely been to a yoga class. I've got some videos, and I found one particular video from one guy that it works for me, for my body. And so I could almost, do the whole routine by heart, including his commentary at this point. But one of the things he says during this thing is he goes like, don't worry. Even if you only get 10% into the stretch, you get 100% of the benefit. And, yoga, any kind of movement, just getting out and walking, enjoying nature, fresh air, a swim, a bike, any kind of movement, I think is, no matter what you do, you get 100% of the benefit.
Yeah, just like showing up and doing the work is a hell of a lot better than if you just stay home and sit on the couch. I remember I did CrossFit in England one time. I lived in England for a year. I don't know if I mentioned that when you and I were connecting, and there was this one girl that was new to the gym, or the box, excuse me. So I get it right with the CrossFitters. Right. She it was her first time doing CrossFit, and she ended up getting like the lowest scores on the lifts, and finishing at the end of the time and everything like that. But I still went over to her and I said, "Hey, good job, right on." And she says, "Oh, but I finished last in everything." I'm like, "Well, you still outlapped everyone who decided to stay home on the couch today. So
Exactly.
give yourself some props there."
Exactly. Yeah. Right on.
All right. Awesome. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about this obstacle course racing and Spartan racing, because you mentioned that you had your first one a few years back. So what are some of the other events that you've done? And again, we could probably fill a couple of episodes on just this one topic alone, but maybe I'll ask you to dial in and say, what have been some of the most impactful ones for you?
Yeah, so I know there are a lot of obstacle course races out there, and I actually, so Spartan's just the one that I got turned on to, and it's an incredible community and culture, and it bakes in a lot of the mindset things that have been very helpful for me, and that I work with my son, and he's racing now too, and my wife's just done her first one as of Sunday, so
nice.
Super proud of her for getting outside of her comfort zone. Yeah, and there are others. Bone frog is one that I'd like to try. But in terms of impactful moments, I mean, I think if I pick 3 or 4 quick ones, one is the first one, because it got me hooked, and thanks to my buddies for getting me out there. And then there are different formats and different lengths. So there is a sort of a short, medium, and long are the main 3. And when I did that first long one, it was here in California, Big Bear Ski Resort. You're up and down the ski mountain. It is a tough one. I think it's probably one of the tougher ones of that 13-mile distance. And I finished, I had no idea how long it was going to take. I had a headlamp with me. I was fully prepared to be, still out there in the dark with the bears on Big Bear Mountain. And I basically finished right at sundown. And there was a water dunk wall at the end, they call it, where you have to go submerge yourself and get wet. And it's getting down there in temp at that point, even in May. And just finishing that thing, having the sense of accomplishment of finishing it, after all the things I had to go through training-wise and emotionally to stick through those 13 tough miles, be freezing cold at the end, and then have my family there waiting there for me. I think we were all in tears, kind of when it was over. And there's just been a lot of very similar kind of emotional experiences to it. Racing in Sparta, Greece was three very long races in 2 days. Kind of had similar emotions to them. When you and I were in Tahoe, I did the ultra format, which is 50 kilometers, 31 miles.
Wow.
It's a whole nother animal to get through emotionally. And then, maybe best of all is I get some very strong emotions around my own racing, but watching my son do what he does, that's probably the best of all.
All right, right on. I had this thought when I was in Tahoe, because Tahoe, I only did the VIP super event, the 8-mile one that they had there. But I remember it was really, really tough because, I live in Florida, so I'm a flatlander. Okay. I'm at sea level, and then here I am going up to 6,000 plus feet in elevation. And it was 90 degrees 2 days before the race when I was still in Florida, and then it dropped down to 40 the day of the race too. And so I had a hard time with it, but there were so many people there, and it's been crazy how obstacle course racing has grown so much over the years. But it still kind of begs the question is, why do so many people pay their good hard-earned money and commit possibly vacation time from work and stuff like that to literally go suffer at these events? I mean, it's kind of an interesting, I'd almost dare say phenomenon, So, but what do you think has been your why overall to just consider, to continue going to these races again, paying the money, putting in the time, putting in all the effort to go suffer? I mean, I'm kind of curious.
Right. Yeah. Maybe I'm not quite right and in the head, and my wife might second that. But, I think somehow as humans, ultimately, we're wired to do hard things. I think we thrive in survival. And the complacency, when things get too easy, when we get too complacent, when life doesn't really present challenges, I feel like we're not as happy and fulfilled as when we are sort of taking down life's obstacles. And some people say that, when you don't go create or find obstacles, life will find other ways to throw them at you. So right. I'd almost rather, go after the manufactured crucibles. I tend to sort of hang out in the physical realm because I'm comfortable getting uncomfortable physically. Mm-hmm. Other people, like my wife, would be a lot more comfortable doing a multi-day silence retreat. So I want to push myself into some other areas like that are uncomfortable. So there are lots of ways to go at this, but I think generally, as humans, there's something about the way we grow. There's something about adversity that helps make us thrive. And clearly, Spartan in these races, I think that it's one of the fastest growing sports in the world. It is such an adventure. It's great to train for. While you're doing it, sometimes you doubt the reasons that you're there. Mm-hmm. But that again, it makes you makes you understand your purpose. It makes you think about your why. You have to do things in your head while you're going through something like that to kind of get through it in good shape. And then when you're done, it feels so good. And my wife sent something to Joe DeSena, the founder and owner of Spartan Race, online not too long ago, just saying thank you. It's in the sense that what he had created has brought us together as a family. We travel and do these things. We have these memories. And, like any kind of travel, I think a lot of the value is in the memories. And when you have a family, it's not about the possessions, it's not about things like that. It's more about the time you spend together and the memories you're creating. And for us, it's not just let's drive down the road to a Spartan once a year. We use this now as our adventure travel and our way to make memories together around this event.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that, I remember, being up in those hills in Tahoe and just, freezing. I was shivering and I just fell in the water, and then I had to roll underneath all the wires and stuff like that. And I remember in my mind, I was thinking, man, this is awful, man. I can't wait to be done with this. But then once it was all actually over, the only thoughts that were going through my mind was, okay, that was awesome. When can I do that again? It's interesting how it works out. And, going back to also your point where you mentioned that in this day and age that we have it set up to where we can avoid, challenges and uncomfortable situations if we want. It's not like our ancient ancestors had to, run down these massive animals to, hunt them and kill them for food, or having to spend all the time in the forest foraging for all these plants that you need too. It's like you can just push a few buttons on your phone and someone's bringing a ready-made meal to your door, right? So we pretty much we have to manufacture, hardship in this day and age to build our strength and to harden our resolve and things like that. So it's just really interesting how, things have changed as technology has grown, and, just how these events that other people have created kind of allow us to kind of, I guess, tap into our more primordial side, if you will. I mean, we can go down a huge rabbit hole there, but I'm sure that's probably what maybe a lot of people were thinking as well when they decided to sign up.
Yeah, and I think another aspect of it, and this is also, I think, true of any kind of international travel or circle back to kind of where we started the conversation, is you start to deal with hard things or things that are different or uncomfortable. And at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, it puts everyday life in perspective. Mm-hmm. You come home, and you probably come home with some, packing some things that you learned that you enjoy overseas, as you experience new food or culture or places or whatever it might be. And then you also come home realizing some things that you didn't like as much as you do like at home, and it makes you appreciate them even more when you have that perspective. So I also think, going through the hardships of travel, the unknowns, or going through manufactured crucibles, doing hard things like that, helps you come back to everyday life with a little more perspective. You have a little more patience with your kids, with traffic, with things that are tough at work, and you go like, Josh just did 8-9 miles in the freezing cold up and down a mountain in Tahoe. You know what? If you're stuck in traffic for 5 minutes, not a big deal. It just brings that perspective.
Yeah, and I kind of had something like that happen recently too. Recently, I got a flat tire on my vehicle, and I was on my lunch break, and I knew I was going to be late getting back to work because I had to change this tire. But I'm like, you know what? I've gone through a lot worse than this. This is nothing. Because also, as you've mentioned, that life is inevitably just going to happen. If we don't seek out challenges ourselves, life, fate, however you want to call it, is going to throw them at us, whether we like it or not. But once we seek out these challenges ourselves, we kind of begin to inoculate ourselves against challenge and hardship, like you mentioned, and that when these things inevitably do arise, again, whether we like it or not, then it's not going to be that big of a deal. We were able to, because of how we've built ourselves up, we're able to sort of soften the blow, if you will.
Yeah, and I think you put those in the memory bank and kind of refer back to them. I now that I got my son doing this too, I like to work with him on the mindset side of racing, and then we can bring that back to soccer. We can bring that back to school. we can bring that back to how he's behaving, when he talks to mom and the mindset around those things. Or, you just go back to kind of things you file away in the memory bank. Hey, remember when, this happened and you lost it in this race in Hawaii. But then when you put that in perspective, the next day you came back and you killed it, so, okay, now let's fast forward. Fine, you failed an obstacle. Well, that's what they're there for. You learn from them and you learn from your past mistakes and the things that grew out of those. And, you just extend those, whether it's in sport or life or relationships or whatever it might be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of valuable life lessons that we've been able to take from our conversation today. Not only just with your world travel, going around for the 7 months that you were telling us about, but also in the obstacle course races. So, and it looks like you're not slowing down anytime soon. We're kind of getting this in right away early off in the year, because I know you got a pretty booked calendar. So tell us a little bit about what do you got coming up? What's in the pipeline as far as obstacle course racing goes?
Yeah, I got kind of a crazy year going on all around. I got to figure out where I'm going to fit it all in. Last year I did so I'll branch even a little bit broader, but last year I did a SEAL Fit 12-hour overnight boot camp event. Now you went through Marines and did the real deal. I just played at it for 12 hours.
It's a lot of fun, isn't it?
In a way, it's a lot of fun. And at least I knew it was going to end, 12 or so hours later. So looking at maybe doing a 24-hour version of one of those this year, which was my way of helping prepare for that 31-mile Spartan last year. And I also Spartan has some endurance events for 12 and 24 hours. So those are kind of cross training, if you will. I am super excited to let off the gas pedal a little bit in the middle of this year and go join Patrick Sweeney and some others at a conference out in Martha's Vineyard in June. But besides that, it is pedal to the floor on Spartan racing this year. I'm shooting at 13 trifectas, which is 39 races, in lieu of a few of those 13-mile beasts. So trifecta is a short, medium, and long, all in the ssame calendar year. I'm going to do that 13 times.
Wow. But
I'm going to substitute for 3 or 4 of those 13-milers a few 31-milers, the 50K Ultra Beast, which you don't get any extra credit for, but you're also putting it at risk, because if you don't make your cutoff times, you disqualify, you don't get credit for the 13 miles. You're just, you get no credit at all. So trying to go big on that. I'll run some extra laps like I did this weekend with my wife and a client, and trying to put in about 50 Spartan races this year. 2020 is the 2500th anniversary of the Battle of Thermopylae, the Battle of 300.
Sweet.
And those guys hiked, I want to say they marched 378 kilometers from Sparta to Thermopylae. So my goal is to put in 378, not kilometers, but 378 miles worth of Spartan racing this year, and close out the season with Sparta, Greece. I'm going to do the Trifecta World Championship in November. So going to be a very, very busy race year.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. Well, I certainly wish you well, and wish you safe passage as you go about doing that. That's going to be pretty awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Well, before we get to the wrap up here, I do want to give you a couple of minutes to tell us a little bit more about Man of Mastery. As I've introduced you at the start of this conversation, that you are the creator of. So tell us a little bit about that. I know it consists of a blog and a podcast and a few other things. So, by all means, give us a little bit of a synopsis on Man of Mastery.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate it. Really enjoy being here to talk to you about adventure travel, and life is an adventure, and we worked in a couple aspects on that, and really all about you and your audience and that travel theme. But appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about myself as well. A lot of this has really culminated into this thing I called Man of Mastery. Very tongue-in-cheek, sort of cheesy title. Sort of like we were talking about early on, is you just lean in and start after it. And hey, looked it up, it was available, boom, go with it. Figure out the rest. But it's really the mastery component is what it's sort of about, inspired by this concept of life being a journey, and success being a process, not a point in time. And life is not an end state. It is a journey, and it has setbacks and plateaus. And so really, this is, in, I think, the podcast sort of world and a lot of maybe marketing and consumer engagement, we talk about the avatar, sort of understanding your audience. And I think most of us talk to ourselves, versions of ourselves. So
right.
For me, this is, guys that have progressed to some point in their life and maybe now have the opportunity or the time or the leisure to step back a little bit and go, okay, what am I going to do next? What's my next adventure? Where am I going next? What do I want the legacy of my life to be? What was my purpose? And what do I want to spend some years in the future doing? And so really it is about that journey. It is about mindset, and it's about how to apply that mindset in life. And it really is about the adversity through growth sort of concept we were talking about. So mostly I think it resonates with an audience kind of like us. Have a website at manofmastery.com. On social media, at the Man of Mastery on Facebook and Instagram. And then a weekly podcast where really my cadence, my goal, my discipline is about getting out there, learning from all different kinds of people, about all different kinds of things. It really just come back to how do we show up in life as a better version of ourselves every day? Just work on those little incremental changes to be a better father, a better husband, better at work, all those kind of things. And ultimately, my hope is share the things that I find that are working for me that other people might also find useful and valuable, whether that's kind of midlife guys like me, or helping my son out, or guys that can kind of get ahead of the curve a little earlier in life. So I'd love for your audience to connect with us and tune in and see what we can do for them as well.
All right. Well, I'll get all of that linked up in the show notes for this episode so our listeners can go and find them there. Well, as we wrap up here, Michael, I just have a few remaining questions for you. And one of the things that I like to do with my guests is have them issue a challenge to our listeners, because we've obviously talked about a lot of great topics today, and we passed on a lot of great information today as well. But all that can only go so far, right? We have to follow it up. It's the action that makes the difference, not the knowledge. Knowledge must become action. So what I'd like to ask you is, what challenge would you issue to our listeners for them to start living a more adventurous life? Yeah,
absolutely. Completely agree. It's all about the action. And travel is a great one. Like we said early on, I think it packages up so many areas of learning. So I would say go set a scary goal for yourself, no more than 18 months out. And maybe it's international travel. Maybe it's an obstacle course race. Maybe it's a silence retreat. Maybe it's opening your mind to yoga. Just find something that seems really uncomfortable, and create your adventure, put it on the calendar, and then make a plan on how you're going to get from here to there. Because again, that end state is fun, but it's all about the journey between here and there.
All right, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more there. Right on. All right, so what I have next for you is what I call my final three. These are three questions that all of my guests get asked at the end of the show. I like to think that they're fun questions, but maybe that could be subjective. But here we go. You're going to get asked these as well.
I'll do my best.
And the first of those three questions is, what is your favorite place that you've been to so far?
I'll drop back to Nepal. I just think that it's really hard to name one place, but when you can find a place where the mountains are so big, you can't even fit them in the frame of a photograph, walking around high up in the Annapurnas and spinning prayer wheels and seeing snow-capped mountains and meeting the people you meet, it's a special place.
All right, right on. I'd say that's probably a first for the podcast, Michael. Like, we've covered the globe pretty good with the answers to these questions, but I think that's the first time someone's mentioned Nepal.
All right,
so
sounds good.
Right on. All right, the next question that I have for you: what is one thing on your bucket list that you have yet to do?
Man, I got a lot on there, but I'll tell you one that, and maybe it's fear, right? Maybe it's fear-based that I kind of keep putting off. skydiving. And there's a place right down the road here run by some very, very, very highly skilled, competent guys. And my wife even bought me a gift certificate, although oddly enough, she bought it the day I upped my life insurance. I'm still not sure what that means. But I need to get out there and do that one. And part of the journey I've been on came out of some anxiety and fear of flying that I developed. So that's going to be one of my ways to face that.
All right. Well, you're going to have a good time because I'll tell you what, it's, I've done it twice now. It is pretty nerve wracking because it takes about 15 minutes for the plane to get up to the right altitude to jump. And, that's when the butterflies really set in. And even more so once they actually open up the door and your feet's just dangling off the side of this open door. But once you actually get out of the plane, you're good because all of that, anxiety just gets replaced with adrenaline and excitement, and it's just an absolute blast from there. So just like anything else that we've talked about, it's uncomfortable at first, but then once you do it, you wonder why you were even nervous in the first place. So,
awesome. All right. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm excited to, for you to go out and do that soon. So,
nice.
Right.
I'll check back in with you once I do that.
Right on. All right. And the last of these three questions, and this is a two-parter. What is your favorite animal, and have you seen this animal in the wild?
You did throw me this one. I thought about it a little bit, so I'm gonna kind of deviate a little bit. I'll just say, for some reason, I've always liked dolphins. I think they're a beautiful animal, and just this idea that it's a mammal, and somehow maybe we're closely related to them. I used to live on the beach in Pensacola, Florida, and I could just see them swimming by as I worked from home or looked out at the beach, which was super majestic. But when you ask the question about have you seen the animal in the wild, so quick story. Koalas, I wouldn't probably ever name koala as my favorite animal, but visited Australia, I think it was 2 years ago with my family, and visited some friends there that we met traveling. Again, it's the people you meet, right? And we'd go driving up in the mountains outside their home in Adelaide, Australia, and my wife's super excited to see a koala. And my Aussie buddy is like, listen, mate, you're going to see one, but you're not going to see it today. You're going to see it in the zoo, and you're not going to see it in the wild. I've lived here my whole life. And my wife's like, no, we're going to see a koala today. And sure enough, she's got the video of this. Like a minute later, we come around the bend of a curve in the mountains. There's two cars stopped, and there's a koala trapped in the middle of the road trying to figure out how to get past the guardrail.
Say what?
Right. I feel like somehow
wow.
She summoned this thing up. So it's crazy.
Oh, well, hopefully she summons up other cool animals for you all to see when you go out and travel more, and, right. That's cool. Right on. All right. Well, Michael, before we close out here, let's just recap once again where our listeners can go to connect with you. So website, social media, where your podcast is out there on those different platforms. How can we reach out and connect with you, man?
Yeah, appreciate that recap, Josh. Man of Mastery is the podcast. You can find it on iTunes and all the major platforms. Social media, I'm probably most active on Instagram at the Man of Mastery. And then the website, manofmastery.com, if you're interested in a little bit more about my background story and some additional information I've got up there. I would encourage people to tune in, always looking to get better, understand the audience, deliver value. So feel free to reach out to me by email and by direct message on social media.
All right, cool. And like I said, I'll get all of those linked up in the show notes for our listeners to go and find them there. Well, Michael, hey, I tell you what, man, I really enjoyed our conversation today. It's always kind of cool just to, share these stories and, just really kind of recall the life lessons that we've learned along the way. It's not only beneficial, I think, for us to ponder on them, but I hope our listeners got some good benefit from it as well. And I appreciate you jumping on short notice. I think we only really just started talking, maybe about a week and a half ago, and we kind of got this set up right away. So I appreciate you being flexible there. And yeah, man, just thanks for being here and sharing all this with myself and the listeners. Man, this has been great.
No, honored to be here. Super appreciate the opportunity, Josh. And I feel like we spent the whole time talking about me. So I would love to hear more about your adventures at some point. Mine were just for fun. I think you did a lot in service. So maybe we'll get you over on the Man of Mastery podcast and hear more about your stories.
Yeah, I'd be honored. Absolutely. I'd appreciate that. So,
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Mike.
Yeah, you bet, Josh. Thanks.
That's all I have to say for now, and I'll be back on Wednesday with your Wisdom Wednesday segment, and I'll be back next Saturday with a brand new episode of the blog reading, so be sure to check back into those. But until then, I'm Josh Guerrero saying be safe, happy travels, and always move forward.
Okay, there you have it, guys. Another week in the books. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Josh and the All Around Adventure podcast, and that you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed talking to him. Now, this is the part of the podcast where I usually ask you for ratings and reviews on iTunes, but in this case, I'd like to ask you to go support Josh and the All Around Adventure podcast. It's a great show. He's an excellent host. He's got amazing guests and stories, and I love the mission. So go connect with him via the website, social media, and the podcast with links that you can find in the show notes for this one at manofmastery.com/044. So on the website, manofmastery.com/044. And in particular, make sure you check out his recently announced Operation Dual Trek that I mentioned earlier. He's hiking the 1,000-mile length of Paraguay and Uruguay this summer to raise awareness and funds for the American Veterans Archaeological Recovery Organization. So, otherwise known as AVAR, they're putting vets to work in the field on archaeological projects, and that's doing three things. One is it offers a new team, a tribe, and a connection. Two is it provides a new mission, in this case to protect cultural heritage. And three, it sets up possible career choices and future success as a work endeavor if they like archaeology. So you can find that fundraiser link in the show notes as well, or you can just go hit it directly at gofundme.com/dualtrek. And also, before I wrap up, I just wanted to thank you again for your time. If you enjoyed the show, please help spread the word and share the show with a couple other friends or family members who would enjoy and benefit as well. If you would please take a moment or two to do that, it helps support the cause and helps spread the word. Okay, that's it for this week. Make sure you tune in again next Thursday. But until then, no excuses. Get out there and get after it.